I think it's fair to say that most couples who break up don't like each other. Many have a great deal of difficulty communicating and cooperating with each other on even the simplest matters, like arranging pickups and drop-offs for their children on access visits. But for a narrow group of separated parents, the animosity and hostility becomes toxic. When one parent hates the other so much that he or she can't bear the thought of their child having a healthy, loving relationship with the other parent, we're entering the realm of parental alienation.
Brought to you by AdviceScene.com. Free legal answers from verified lawyers.
Parental alienation. Why do some parents do everything within their power to turn their children against the other parent? How does the justice system deal with this serious problem? And what can be done to help children in this situation? We'll be talking with a senior family law lawyer, Lauren McLean. And we also have a rare opportunity to hear from a woman who says she was victimized by parental alienation as a child. Her name is Rhonda Pisanello, and she's a strong advocate in the campaign to protect children from venomous parents. Lauren, Rhonda, thank you so much for joining us here on Family Matters. I want to ask you, Rhonda, can you tell us what you went through as a child?
In 1973, my parents got a divorce.
And how old were you then?
I was 10 years old, and my father was actually awarded custody, and my mother was given access to see us on weekends. About a month after the order was granted in the Peace River courts, my father took us over to England. The court did grant an order for that in the Edmonton courthouse.
Was your mother part of that court case?
No, she was not there. Her lawyer was not there. There was no one. She didn't know.
And why did your father move you and your siblings to England?
To go to work in the offshore rigs in the North Sea.
So he had a job there, and you're saying that he got a court order without notice to your mom.
Right.
To move you and your siblings to England without her consent, without her knowledge. Mm-hmm. Did you ever see your mom again?
Once we went to England, no, I didn't see her until I was 18, and I came back to Canada.
What were you told as a child about what was going to happen in terms of your relationship with your mom?
We were told that she didn't want us. We were told that she didn't love us anymore, and she was tired of looking after kids and changing diapers and just all those nice things.
Did you ever get a chance to say goodbye?
No. No, they didn't know where we were, and we didn't know where we were going until we were on the airplane, in the air going to England.
And so when you got to England and you were told that your mom didn't want you, didn't love you, you went how long before ever seeing her again?
It was 8 years, just about.
8 years?
Yes.
And then how did you reconnect with your mother?
When I was 17 and a half, I ran away from my father and stepmother and went into hiding, basically in Doncaster in England, until I turned 18. And once I turned 18, I returned to our town in Doncaster, and I started to look. I couldn't remember names, I couldn't remember places, but I could remember the name of my grandfather's theatre, so I called there overseas from England to Canada. That
must have been a very emotional reconnection with your mom when you finally found her.
Yes, very, very emotional. Hard for both of us.
Did you talk about your mom to your dad and your stepmom when you were in England and ask if you could see her or contact her?
No, we weren't allowed to speak about my mother to anybody. Our stepmother was called Mum. We were told to call her that the day they got married, and no one was supposed to know that we had a different mother.
Tell me something. This is, as I indicated in the intro, this is very rare to speak to someone who went through this as a child. How do you feel that the alienation that you experienced from your mother affected you in your life, in your own well-being as a person?
I was lost. I had no self-worth. I didn't feel good for anybody. I was treated as a traitor in my father's home for speaking or trying to speak about my family that was left behind. And I believed what they told me to an extent that my family in Canada, my maternal family, didn't want me either. So I was right in the middle of nowhere, and I had nothing to connect to, felt like I was drifting.
I think you mentioned that you even had an emotional breakdown, mental health problems.
Yes, I've attempted suicide 3 times in my life. The last time I was 32. I had just had my 3rd child, and I had no reason. Like, I didn't know what was wrong, but I just couldn't connect to anything for all those years. I struggled.
And did your siblings ever get to reconnect with your mom?
No, she passed away in 2007, and it was 34 years had gone by since we left on the airplane, and she never saw them again before she passed away.
It's a harrowing story that we've just heard, actually very emotionally powerful, even for me as a judge who listens to a lot of tragedy every day. When we come back, we're going to take a break. When we come back, I'm going to be asking our guest lawyer, Lorne McLean, to tell us about his experience representing parents in cases where alienation has occurred. Please stay with us. Welcome back to Family Matters. We're discussing parental alienation today with our guests, lawyer Lorne McLean and advocate Rhonda Piscinello. Lorne, you've been a lawyer for 28 years in family law. What's your reaction to what you've just heard from Rhonda?
You see some of the indicia of the trauma that the child suffers when an abnormal parent fails to recognize that a child shouldn't forfeit the love and guidance of 2 caring and concerned parents merely because of marriage breakdown. So the cases are rare, but when they do occur, the results for all parties are devastating. It's not just a situation where the targeted parent has an unhealthy relationship with the child. It's also the child's unhealthy relationship with the custodial parent or the parent that's actually involved in the alienation, which is equally as sick. And only when you deal with all 3 parties can you get the family healthy again, and hopefully the outcome will be a satisfying post-separation relationship of all parties with the child.
Now, I want to ask you, you say that the parental alienation, true parental alienation, is rare. That's my experience too. I think it would help our viewers to define it because parents have been behaving badly for years. It's not new. And it happens, unfortunately, that kids get caught in the middle of parental disputes. But we're talking about something much more severe, aren't we?
We are. I mean, when 2 parents get together, they see the positives and the negatives, and overall they believe that their spouse is an overall net positive. Unfortunately, at the end of a marriage, they tend to focus more on the negative. Most people move past that very quickly and recognize that, you know, parents are forever, the children need both parents.
But when you get to alienation, though, how do you have to distinguish it from cases where a child may justifiably not want to have contact with a parent?
Right. Let's talk about the definition then. So parental alienation will tend to occur in a high conflict case. It's marked by a rejection and denigration of the child to the other parent that reaches the level of a campaign. Secondly, it's not justified, so it's not due to deficiencies in the targeted or the access parent. And third, there is an active involvement by the custodial or the primary residential parent that is driving this denigration and rejection. If you don't have all 3 of those factors, you don't have parental alienation. Estrangement would occur from the access parent, for example, if they have deficiencies in parenting. They're unavailable, they're overly strict, they're too lax, there's drug and alcohol problems, or there's been physical or sexual abuse. Those are justified reasons for the child not to want to go to the parent. That's not parental alienation.
And I can tell you that as a judge, it's often very difficult to be able to distinguish between the two because parents come to court accusing each other of all kinds of things, often with no proof. And, you know, I don't think I've ever yet seen a case where a child did not want to have a relationship with their non-custodial parent, that the custodial parent didn't say to me, well, it's the non-custodial parent's fault. It's their fault. That's why. It's not that I haven't done anything wrong. It's that parent. That parent doesn't know how to be a good parent.
That's the problem, and what we find, and one of the strategies I will approach a case with, and I think it's important for a family lawyer to deal on both sides of this issue. So I do not just act for parents who say it's parental alienation. I act for parents who are wrongfully accused of being an alienator. But to get a judge involved at the beginning that will stay through the case throughout, to get a psychologist who's experienced with parental alienation, estrangement, other concepts such as adultification and parentification right at the start, because if you delay, the issue tends to get worse.
And it's kind of a form of brainwashing, poisoning a child's mind against the other parent with no justification at all.
Right, you've got inculcation going on, you've got a child who loses, this is one of the other hallmarks of parental alienation, loses the ability to critically think. So that child no longer thinks for themselves, begins to identify with the parent, sees white knight, black knight, good and bad, will only remember negative sort of histories of the access or targeted parent, and sees no good, shows no guilt over this, and is not ambivalent in any way.
Rhonda, does any of this sound familiar to you?
Yes, yes, very much. When we did speak about her mother, she was called the Thing. That's how the family referred to her.
The Thing?
The Thing. And when I did try and tell my younger sister, who had no idea what was going on, I got the belt from my stepmother the day it happened.
When you say you got the belt, you were beaten?
Beaten with a leather 2-inch Western belt, told to lay down on the bed and remove my pants. And
so you suffered physical abuse as a result of the alienation as well. I want to ask you, Lauren, what kind of conduct do we see? What alienating behavior? We've heard about physical abuse. We've heard about an abduction, which is a pretty extreme form of alienation.
One of the things you'll look at, first of all, is has the targeted parent previously had a very good relationship with the child? And that suddenly, after the separation, that relationship starts to decline, the child starts to denigrate, the child starts to refuse, and in more serious cases, the child will actually run away or maybe raise false allegations of abuse, for example. So you see a continuum of it.
Unfortunately, the longer it goes on, as you were saying, the harder it is to undo that kind of damage to a child.
One of the problems is, too, that the targeted parent will somehow think perhaps it's their fault, or maybe they're putting too much stress on the child by trying to see them, and that access parent will withdraw, which is probably the worst thing they can do. Because
you mean
that just
walk away?
Walk away or withdraw or start giving up on the access, which just lets the alienating parent have more time to complete their job.
Well, it's understandable, I guess, that a parent might be so overwhelmed by this that they would walk away. We're going to take a break. When we come back, I'm going to be asking Lauren how effective the courts are in addressing parental alienation, and we're going to talk about the advocacy that Rhonda has been doing to help others. Please stay tuned. Welcome back to Family Matters and our discussion of parental alienation. I got some tough questions for you, Lauren. Judge to lawyer.
Shoot.
I'm going to give you some remedies that courts traditionally use to address parental alienation and see what you think. Police enforcement. A court orders that the police shall enforce the access and go and get the kids and deliver them to the access parent.
I think in cases where there's been sort of prolonged denials, it makes sense. Sometimes you don't want the heavy hand of the police showing up and the impact on the child, and you can turn, in an alienation case, that somehow turns the alienating parent into a bit of a martyr in the child's eyes. Oh, they called the police on mom, or they called the police on dad, for example. So depends on the circumstance, but yes, I agree, it does fit in certain circumstances.
It's got to be scary for a child to have the police come, especially if the child's been brainwashed and really believes that the other parent is someone evil. It's got to be scary.
Oh, exactly. And what you see is these children have this sometimes intense fear in the serious cases, but based on very frivolous or unsubstantiated allegations. And so in younger children, they will make something up that you can clearly tell is the words of the parent. And those are sort of tip-off and alarm bells. So the alarm bells will start to ring when that happens.
I find that in many cases, if a child is adamant that they won't go, and the child's older than a baby, the police won't push it. That they do have a discretion to say we're not going to force a child kicking and screaming to an access visit.
Right, and you know, you have to ask yourself, and in cases when a judge will force a child to go, is it in the child's best interest not to see this caring parent, no matter how adamant the child is? And my view is that if it is in the child's interest and that parent is capable of providing a loving and safe home for them, that the courts shouldn't be afraid of making that child go, because Rhonda may tell us this, secretly that child may wish that someone will step in and make them go so the pressure's taken off of them.
Well, it sounds like in your case, Rhonda, you never really were brainwashed. You didn't really believe the negative things that were being said to you about your mom.
To a degree, I did believe some of the things that my mom may not have wanted to be with us, as we were told, but the bond I had with my grandmother is what pulled me through, I think, up and out of the alienation, whereas my two younger sisters succumbed to it more than I did.
They totally bought the negativity.
Yes.
And never, so they must have not been thrilled to see you run away and go and find your mom.
I believe so. I haven't seen them for 17 years either, so
So there's another thing, Lauren, that even among siblings, it causes dissension and ruptured relationships.
Well, it's sometimes the concept of the cult. So now she's discommunicated because she has turned against the leader of the cult, which in your case was your father. It's not always women. Very important to know that.
That's right. It can be either parent. Another remedy that we see in the courts is contempt of court. A motion asking the judge to find the custodial parent in contempt and to send that parent to jail.
Okay, so contempt of court, hard to prove, more of a criminal standard, and parental alienation cases are notoriously sort of hard to prosecute. The courts will not want to believe it in the first instance. It will take a lot of denials of access or interference of access before a court will act, because a court would not believe that most normal parents would do this. Unfortunately, you're not dealing with a normal parent in a parental alienation situation, so contempt can work. It's heavy-handed. I'd rather see 2-for-1 replacement access. For every day of access that is denied, 2 should be given back, because what happens is the alienating parent will try to deny that access knowing the other parent will go, and worst case scenarios, they just get back the day that was denied. You've got to put some teeth in it so there's a downside to the alienator from those actions.
Really effective enforcement.
Exactly.
You know, a couple of times now you've said this is not a normal parent. Is the big elephant in the room that we are dealing with someone, a parent who would do this, to go to such a length? It has a mental health problem or a personality disorder?
Psychological studies show that there's a high rate of psychopathology in a parent that would do this. And just think about it. You know, a normal parent would not do it. And so if this is a good parent in every other respect except for this psychopathology, I say they're not a good parent, because they are breaking the bond with another equally important parent, and that shows they're not in a position to make proper decisions. They shouldn't have custody.
Well, Rhonda, was your dad, outside of the alienation issue, how would you describe him as a parent in terms of meeting the rest of your needs, getting you to school, taking care of your health, your education?
He was absent. He was never there. He worked 3 weeks, 4 weeks at a time. We were left in the care of our stepmother.
And so this wasn't a case of a parent really stepping up to the plate himself as a primary caregiver.
No, he handed over the job to her.
Well, I'm going to keep the pressure on Lauren. Another remedy that courts are asked to impose is to actually change custody, which is very severe. Have you had experience with seeking to actually change the custodial placement of the child?
Yes, I have. So what will happen in the first instance is you will go to court, you will get your court order. If you aren't successful in getting custody, you'll have your access. If access problems develop, I like to proceed back aggressively and go for something like a shared custody, because if there's alienation going on, if I can get it to at least shared custody, at least half of the time that child's in a normal home. If the alienation continues and it's shared custody, then the court has to go to the stage of considering the transfer of custody. And again, you have to take into account the effect on a child who is refusing to go to that parent, being forced to go, versus, I say, the longer-term harm of leaving him with a custodial parent who's psychologically damaged. And then you may move on to cutting the access off even after you've changed custody to the parent and doing what is called a parentectomy, where you remove that parent for a while to allow the bond between the targeted parent and the child to heal, and then in turn you reintroduce that parent, the custodial parent or ex-custodial parent, and try to get their bond healthy again. So it's really complicated.
Well, you can see that the justice system has its work cut out for it when these kinds of allegations are made in terms of really figuring out what's best for the child. In the few remaining minutes, though, I want Rhonda to tell us, you are on the board of the Parental Alienation Awareness Organization. Can you tell us very briefly what that organization's mandate is?
Yes. Their goal is to educate and create awareness throughout, internationally actually, about the harmful long-term effects parental alienation behaviors have on children. They focus on the children. They don't take a position in such things as a syndrome, whether or not it exists. Were founded in 2005 by Sarvi Emo, and they're based in Oakville, Ontario.
Well, I want to hear more about it right after this break. Welcome back to our remaining moments of Family Matters, talking about parental alienation. I am holding up a teddy bear here that I understand is given out by your organization to kids.
Yes.
And on each hand, one says, Dad loves me, one says, Mom loves me.
Yes.
How can people get one of these?
They can go to the website. It's www.paawareness.org, and you can order them on there.
Well, that's great. I hope people will support that organization. Any final words, Lauren?
Harvey, people often ask me who the winners in divorce are, and I always say it's parents that can move on to a satisfying post-divorce life without any bitterness and recriminations, and that know that children need a healthy relationship with both parents after separation.
Well said. Couldn't do it better myself. I think every judge would agree with me. Parental alienation cases are among the most difficult we have. Hope this show will help you get more information about it. From all of us here at Family Matters, thanks for watching. See you next time.
One morning show on all of cable news.
You read about deadbeat parents in the papers and see it on TV all the time. But now someone wants to take a further step. Dick Clark Productions is entertaining an idea, producing a reality show which goes after these parents. The show would track the investigation, arrest, and court process for the deadbeat mom or dad. But critics say it's unfair. And the reason why lots of these parents don't pay up isn't because they're deadbeat dads or deadbeat moms at all. They're just dead broke. Richard Farr is the founder of Kids Rights Radio and the station's on-air commentator. And Richard, thank you for being with us.
Hello, thank you very much.
You know, I describe this as America's most wanted kind of for deadbeat dads and moms. Is that accurate?
That's the way that they wanted to portray the program, and from all of our understandings from the initial discussions with the production company, that's the way that they would like to take it.
What's it going to be called, Deadbeat?
There hasn't been an absolute name yet, and right now they're at the process of working on a sales tape for the program, so this is stopping something that could bring upon damaging stereotypes and humiliating people way before that ever gets into actual production.
Oh, really? You think that it could be stereotypical? Because I guess you're saying that non-custodial parents, they're not all deadbeats. Some of them just don't have money.
Well, that's correct, and then also there's tremendous errors within the child support enforcement system, as well as that there's a lot of money that is in the child support enforcement system, and that's not getting to the children at all.
Okay, we have a question in the audience for you, Richard.
Sure.
Actually, two questions. First of all, if they're not making payments to support their own kids, they're not really dads or moms. Okay. Secondly, if they don't have any money, there are many other things they can do to help their kids out.
Well, have you found that out, Richard? If they don't have the money, how do they help?
There's a lot of parents that work very hard just to be able to be involved in a child's life. The court seems to have an opinion and an attitude to route parents out of the lives of children once you become a non-custodial parent.
Yeah.
So that's really a big problem, that once you can take and enforce issues such as parenting time, you will soon find that the whole child support issue dissolves away very quickly.
So we got two issues going here. One is that whole issue of so-called deadbeat parents, and maybe that's not what they are. And the other was this TV show. Who pitched this idea? I understand it's a police, was it a police officer?
That's right. There was a police officer in Council Bluffs, Iowa, who pitched the original idea, and come to find out that there may be some problems there with him as well. And they weren't exactly honest going into this program, even when we spoke to the executive producer at Dick Clark Productions. And that's another issue that concerns us very much, is that if the executive producer is going to tell us, and please let me say also that, you know, with Dick Clark not being there and him currently being ill, I think that there may be a situation that he just doesn't know, because he is a long-time icon of wholesome America values. And I just think that if Mr. Clark actually knew what was going on with this program, I don't think it would have even have gotten this far.
Would anybody want to watch this?
You know, I'm sure that there's a part of American society that would enjoy seeing, you know, a human being displayed and humiliated. But I think for the most part that this cuts to the very central core of America's and American families.
But I can just hear people saying, Richard, oh, it's just TV.
Yeah, well, you know, TV has a great influence in American lives. It's where we get our news, and it's where we learn what exactly is going on within our society.
Yeah. What's Dick Clark Productions? What's the latest that you've heard from them?
The last that we heard from him, I had discussions with Michael Richards, who is the executive producer. First, he told me that that they had no plans any longer to do the show.
Yeah.
And then they turned around and they told us that they were going forward with the program as well.
Okay, well, let us know what goes on there. And do you want a campaign? You want people to call? Oh, I don't want to call for that. What have you been doing, calling Dick Clark Productions and trying to get them to stop?
Yes, I've worked very close trying to have discussions with Michael Richards of Dick Clark Productions, and have spoken with other people within the organization.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Richard, keep us informed on that story, okay?
Thank you very much.
You know what you can call us, tell us what you think about that particular story there, or any topic we have on Dayside. You simply go to our website, foxnews.com, and you go to the slash and it says Dayside. It's very easy. Up next, these two teens thought they were doing a good deed, so why did a neighbor sue them for leaving cookies on her porch?
Okay, good late afternoon. Thank you for being here. I just wanted to give you folks a briefing on, in terms of what our activities were last night as this situation unfolded in the area of 43rd and Hour, Sherman Boulevard, this 43rd Street. And a little bit of a briefing moving forward into tonight. I'm going to start with a timeline. Well, actually, what I'll do is I'll start by saying this, because there's a lot of misunderstanding, I think, in terms of what causes these situations. The police use of force serves as an igniter, there's no doubt, but to an already volatile situation, a volatile mix of urban pathologies, failed urban policy that exacerbates inescapable poverty, failing public schools, inadequate parenting, father-absent homes. We all know when fathers are not around to shape the behavior of young boys, they oftentimes grow up to be unmanageable misfits that the police have to deal with in an aggressive fashion. Pathologies like lifestyle choices, questionable lifestyle choices, gang involvement, drug and alcohol abuse, as well as massive unemployment. Those are the ingredients. Those are the things that cause resentment, anger, and frustration to boil beneath the surface, and then all of a sudden a police situation comes along, and that's why I said it's an igniter, but it's an igniter to an already festering situation. So, you know, this whole last couple of years, coming out of Ferguson, there's been a lot of focus on police and police use of force, and that's fine by me. All right, we get our consent from, our authority from the consent of the government. If something's bothering them, we should have discussions about it. But this thing has been hijacked for a political and it's a political construct now. I mentioned that 2 years ago. If you want to go back and look at some of the tapes, I said this was a political construct, this whole war on police. And that, in fact, was a war on police that mirrored what had gone on in the 1960s. Same thing, same model, same subversive groups involved with different names now, different generation, of course, as all those folks from the Students for a Democratic Society got old and they're probably senior citizens now and a little tired for this, or tired of it. So I was acutely aware of what was going on and exposed it as such. So we get into what happened last night. You all received a briefing from the Milwaukee Police Department this afternoon. Squads made a traffic stop. Occupants got out of the car and confronted the police. At least one was armed. They may both have been armed, but I'm aware that one was armed. And an officer used force, fearing that his life was in danger, and it's an ongoing investigation, and that'll sort itself out as time moves forward. And then late last night, some of the residual effect of the thing that I opened up talking about, the anger, the resentment, the frustration in people boiled over. And we had an untenable situation in Milwaukee. I've made it clear as it related to the riots of Ferguson and of Baltimore that people have to find a more socially acceptable way to deal with their frustration, their anger, and their resentment. Right? This is an orderly society. We have processes, we have institutions with which to deal with these things. And as frustrating as it can be, sometimes it takes a long time to work through the institutions and the processes that we have. It's still what we have to do, because we cannot have the social upheaval, the chaos that we saw last night that frightens good law-abiding people in those neighborhoods. It destroyed businesses where people work, some probably as a means to support their family, and they're going to have to deal with that. But I made it clear this afternoon in some discussions that I have, the goal moving forward is that we cannot have a repeat. I didn't say we wouldn't. I said we cannot have a repeat of what happened last night. Some additional forces have been mobilized and put together. A plan is in place. That plan is fluid. It involves a lot of my resources. I made a call up of all of our personnel this morning to be on standby. They're actually mobilized. You cannot wait too long, as they found out in Ferguson when the mayor put out the call to the governor, and those additional resources never showed up, or showed up late. In Baltimore, the call was never made. I have an obligation, folks, under the state statutes. I also have an obligation under the oath that I took to preserve and protect life and property. All right, that's job one. And to the extent that I have that responsibility, I have to have resources, and I have to make sure that the people that I put in harm's way, like I did last night, like I'll do when these situations arise, that they have the resources necessary to complete the mission. All right, what's the mission? Job one, preservation of life and property. It's a pretty clear mission. So you apply your resources to do that, and you go back, you reassess, hopefully a minimal amount of damage, minimal life or injury, I should say, to life, and hopefully, so far it's been the case after last night, other than the officer use of force, nobody else killed. But I think it's important to point out as well, because we tend to gloss over this stuff. We keep focusing on the police. We keep focusing on the police. And I've said publicly before, stop trying to fix the police, fix the ghetto. And I talked about those urban pathologies that have to be addressed to shrink the size of the underclass. We have the growth of an underclass here in Milwaukee. And you saw some of their behaviors on display last night. So you shrink the size of the underclass. How do you do that? You reduce poverty. You fix the schools. You put people back to work, meaningful work. You hold people accountable for effective parenting and some of those lifestyle choices, which sometimes means if they're going to go out and engage in certain behaviors that society says we're not going to put up with, then there have to be sanctions, and that's where the criminal justice system comes in. That's where the prosecutor's office comes in. And I look around, just about everybody in this room has heard me over the last 5 years, minimum, talking about the role of the criminal justice system, the prosecutor's office, the sentencing practices in this area in Milwaukee County. And I don't know, I guess people didn't think it played a big role, but we're seeing it now. Not just last night, but we're seeing it time and time again. When some individual goes out and does something heinous, we look and they have a long, lengthy criminal history that nobody applied any sanctions to, or any meaningful sanctions, let's put it that way. Maybe some sanctions, slap on the wrist is a sanction, but that's not meaningful. So as I look at the 2 individuals involved in the traffic stop last night, I have their criminal histories in front of me. We will provide their booking photos later on. Fran will put that out. But as I look, the individual who lost his life, "13 arrests, some serious stuff, recklessly endangering safety, the felony, first degree, felony, dismissed." I don't know why. I don't have the reason, but somebody, it isn't going to be me. I guess if you all have an interest, you'll go back and start peeling back the layers to find out what happened. Sometimes this is no fault of the prosecutor. You know, if you can't get, or she can't get, the witnesses to cooperate, I understand that. But that tells the individual who was involved in it that not much is going to happen, and they tend to repeat the behavior. That's how human behavior works. You punish unwanted behavior, you'll see less of it. You do nothing about unwanted behavior, you're going to see a repeat and more of it. It's got a bunch of drug arrests here. Robbery, use of force, no prosecution. I don't know why. I'm not going to blast the prosecutor's office at this point. However, somebody ought to go back and look and see why. There has to be a reason. That's called accountability. If the DA says, hey, we tried, the victims bailed on us, I get that. But if this is one of these second chance, deferred, those are the sorts of things I think that are having a detrimental effect to this community. The second guy, the guy who lived, who's in custody now, possession of a dangerous weapon under 18, dismissed. Some drug dealing. 2-year probation, interlock system, time served, 12 days. It's pretty light sanctions. 2 counts of bail jumping. 2 years probation, time served, 45 days. Another possession of cocaine, probation violation. He's on probation. That means he's been given his chance. In one of these earlier arrests, he's been given his chance. Son, we're going to put you on probation. We're going to give you a chance. You got to walk the straight and narrow. He does not walk the straight and narrow. Gets arrested several times for probation violation. He gets time served 30 days, time served 45 days. It's why we continue to see the behavior repeated.
Fix the ghetto. That was a very eloquent and detailed response by Milwaukee County Sheriff David Clark that we've been listening to, going through a litany of societal problems that have led to some of the unrest and violence that we have seen in the aftermath of some of these police shootings, pointing out that the suspect in this one in Milwaukee last night, 23-year-old Seville Smith, had a lengthy arrest record, 13 arrests, including some felony accounts, some that were dismissed. And the man that Seville Smith was with in that car when the shooting happened also has a lengthy arrest record and was on probation. The police officer involved in the shooting, we were told, African-American, and police certainly showing a great resolve as well as restraint. Last night, we were told earlier, they did not fire one shot. They did not use any force, yet the authorities said there were 48 shots fired in that crowd of people when they were rioting. And Arthel, you have to wonder that if there was a dead cop that we would be mourning right now, is if some of those folks who were out there in Milwaukee last night causing such destruction and damage, if they would show up at a vigil, a candlelight vigil for a police officer slain in the line of duty, as sad as any loss of life is. But clearly, Sheriff Clark just saying he cannot guarantee what can happen tonight. National Guard on standby, basically, not deployed, as sunset in Milwaukee is about 2.5 hours.
Preserve, protect, and defend. Support and defend the Constitution of the United States.
Against all enemies, foreign and domestic.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Powers that be. Powers that be. Powers that be.
State-sanctioned kidnapping is when a state agency unlawfully removes a child or senior from a family's care by illegally editing court hearing tapes or manipulating the court files.
Victims of state-sanctioned child abductions.
It's difficult to believe how easily and quickly children are removed from their parents without any show of wrongdoing.
This amounts to nothing more than a state-sanctioned kidnapping.
Dockets are doctored.
The transcripts had been altered.
Fabricated medical evidence. Tapes edited.
The altering of trial audio tapes.
The audio tapes were criminally edited.
Transcript tapes were edited.
Judges fixing transcripts.
Victims of false allegations of abuse.
Evidence of police wrongdoing, of edited tapes, of manufactured evidence.
The evidence is being manufactured.
Father proves courts edit tapes to remove the evidence that goes against the judge's ruling.
Okay. They know what they're doing. And for them to pretend that they don't know that the records are being altered, these are not stupid people.
This is not just overzealous officials claiming to err on the side of caution for children's welfare. This is a systematic confiscation of children from their parents.
The desire to protect children, of course, is a noble desire. However, what this has turned into is an industry.
We'll tell your mama, we'll tell your pa, we're gonna send you back to Harvard Law.
The stories you've seen here may seem fantastic. In fact, they are very common and almost routine.
There's no penalty for government lawyers who incite their witnesses to commit perjury.
There's absolute immunity for prosecutors that could make conduct illegal and prosecute with the full force of government to create crimes.
A new set of crimes. It creates civil orders without rights, without your rights because you weren't there.
We often have what's called an ex parte hearing. That means one where only one side goes in and the other side doesn't get any notice, has no idea that there's a hearing going on, and doesn't even show up because they don't know it's happening.
And the incestuous nature sort of how the courts and the custody evaluators and the party that's being favored by those professionals in the court system kind of collaborate together.
Children, but in some cases the elderly, are effectively confiscated by court officials. Their estates are plundered.
I was put on trial by federal court.
I was sentenced to 6 months in jail.
And I faced a relentless series of charges.
Just 2 words: federal money.
So the incentive is not to keep the child in the home.
What you have now in this country is a situation where the judiciary and the bar are working together to run a criminal racketeering enterprise that is extorting money from people under color of office.
The courts are a criminal enterprise to get money, federal dollars, from the federal government.
The entire justice system has basically collapsed.
Is this a racketeering scheme? It certainly is. It's racketeering, it's extortion, there's a whole bunch of crimes that are going on. And you have judges that are accountable to no one.
We're standing in front of the Billerica House of Correction where I was wrongly incarcerated for most of the 5.5 months until my mother was able to remortgage the house to come up with the $50,000 cash bail that was required.
If you don't pay us this $150 per hour for the next 5 years, we're going to take the kid away from you. That's a little bit more of an extortionistic demand, because that results in money going directly into the pockets of the private individuals and agencies who are benefiting from this public process and using their authority as governmental agents to extort money out of out of a parent.
I not only discovered that the courts edited hearing tapes, but I discovered the motivation behind their doing these criminal acts, and that is massive federal funding.
The entire judicial system is corrupt.
They lost for gold. Your vote is sold. Take back the soul of our nation.
What they do is they offer the state a bribe or a federal incentive to be involved and conduct themselves in such a manner.
Well, does it create statistics? Is it meant, I don't know that it's meant to create statistics, but it creates cases. And if cases create grants, then so be it.
For every child who is removed from the family home, there are 25 service providers who derive their livelihood from that child's removal. They have a vested interest in maintaining their income. They have a vested interest in maintaining their practice.
Child abuse by public officials.
The worst abuse I've experienced is at the hands of the government, and the worst abuse my child has experienced is at the hands of the government. That's the only abuse that's going on here.
Just to get the word out to the public, I filed a lawsuit against the state bar for racketeering.
I reported case fixing, criminal activity in a court, and I have done 231 days in jail for basically reporting crimes.
And the consequence was that in secret tribunals, I lost my law license. They took it away, and they would not give me a public trial of the matter.
I had my license to practice law suspended without a hearing.
All total, I was arrested 26 times and prosecuted. Literally thrown in jail and prosecuted.
I'm attorney Eugene Rona, a Pennsylvania attorney who is in the process of being disbarred by the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania because I accuse the courts of criminal misconduct for the alteration of court proceeding.
These courts operate in secrecy. They are accountable to virtually no one. They usually leave no record at all of their proceedings.
I had to be silenced through serious discrediting. In other words, discredit me, this former Girl Scout in every sense of the word, by making me a criminal.
They wanted to do anything to see that I didn't win cases.
Lawyers who merely reported that their clients' tapes were illegally edited, boom, they're gone. Yeah. They're terrorized, they're beaten, they're thrown in jail. If I've been beaten, I've been thrown in jail unlawfully, I've been fined $20,000 unlawfully, and I've witnessed other political activists like myself who want to expose this being thrown in jail unlawfully.
And then finally, doing everything you could to psychologically destroy me so that I couldn't assist other people and extract what funds I have so that I couldn't defend myself.
June Maxim, the other speakers, and I are being victimized by domestic terrorists. Domestic enemies of the Constitution who use terror tactics to destroy and suppress all who oppose them.
Tear up the news. Party line views. Replace with your senses.
You have got to talk to your neighbors. Because the media, they're not going to report on it.
Kevin Thompson, whose book on judicial corruption in Massachusetts has been banned.
And this federal funding is having a terribly corruptive effect on journalists, on academics, on prosecutors, on court officials of all kinds.
I found out that every time I exposed public corruption or white-collar crime, the people who I exposed faced no charges, and I faced a relentless series of charges.
The press is biased, and your story does not come out. The true story does not come out.
Our boys are fighting to bring freedom and justice in foreign lands, while here at home it is being stripped from us. Right.
It's a trick played on all of us.
Why would courts and judges do this sort of a thing? The answer to that question is just two words: federal money.
And they just simply created this statute, created all these committees, created these jobs, created these industries, and no one's going to stop them because there's no one to stop them.
So there is an industry completely built up around the redistribution of our children. Who gets the checks for the services that are offered. It's not the parents, and it's not the child. It's the service providers.
I'm here in Washington, D.C. today to ask the federal government why federal funds are available to the legal industry to prey on society's weakest members, our elderly, our handicapped, our mentally challenged, and our children.
This court system is riddled with abuses, with corruption, with graft. Children are effectively walking bundles of cash. Whoever controls the children can get money from the federal government.
The legislature, the judiciary, the legal system lusts after these federal funds.
The federal government is the locomotive driving this whole thing. They're taking otherwise normal courts and they're adding fuel in the form of federal money to subsidize certain actions that they want to see happen.
They ended up creating an industry. An industry. People getting arrested without a hearing and things of that nature, and all having to do with the change in the law.
Judges gave themselves immunity for their decisions, as long as those decisions were not malicious or corrupt. A few years later, the court took the malicious and corrupt away.
Judges have given themselves immunity. Are you aware of that?
I read that about...
absolute immunity. Yeah. They've given lawyers qualified immunity. And in my case, Margaret Marshall used my case to rewrite the anti-SLAPP law to give social workers who commit perjury in court immunity. And the immunity, which are totally un-American, we're all supposed to be equal before the law, but they've made themselves into an aristocracy that operates above the law.
The judges had created immunity. They had created such a thing called sovereign immunity, and I'd look at the Constitution and I'd say, how can you come up with this thing called sovereign immunity where the government is not accountable to the people? How can that happen? There's not a word of it in the Constitution. In fact, the whole idea of the Constitution is the government should be accountable to the people.
How does judicial immunity jive with the concept, the constitutional concept, that all men are equal before the law?
And if you want to continue to have a relationship with your child, you do as we say, or we'll take your child away.
The harm that they do to the children of our nation, that's incredible. You're talking tens of thousands of children being harmed by these judges' actions just so they can collect money from Washington.
When they interfere with the family unit, undermine parental authority, and substitute state decisions for parent decisions, that is going to be the beginning of the destruction of our society.
Justice! When do we want it? Now! When do we want justice? When do we want it? Now!
Is it a big leap to consider that these people who are doing unconstitutional and illegal acts to empower themselves and industries, the legal industries that they belong to, is it a big stretch to really think that they would go so far as to edit tapes?
I guess not.
How can you have a government and all of its little governors being immune at the same time have a right to petition government for redress?
We'll be handing out some flyers trying to raise some awareness and bring some exposure to the sedition and treason that takes place daily in our courtrooms.
Isn't there anybody with a conscience in our judicial system or our government?
Well, the more I asked, the more I saw that it was somehow buried in the field of law and the people, the governed, their inability to control the government.
Thomas Jefferson warned us all that the biggest danger to America isn't from abroad, it's from within, and it's from the judiciary. He, a lawyer, points out that the judiciary is the greatest threat to our democracy. And he's turned out to be more than correct.
More than, yeah.
Yeah.
Come back! Oh, baby, come back! Come back! Baby, please come back!
The courts are a criminal enterprise to get money, federal dollars from the federal government.
Ulf Carlson has experienced firsthand just how much damage the collusion between lawyers and judges can cause.
At the beginning of the divorce, and I had talked to some of the biggest law firms here in Sacramento, and their first question was, who is the judge and who is the opposing attorney? And I was told by numerous firms that they had a very serious concern about that relationship.
The attorney representing Ulf's wife had a close relationship with the judge, and now even serves as both an attorney and a judge in the same courthouse. Not surprisingly, Ulf's judge seemed biased against him during his trial.
Right during cross-examination, the judge just got up and left, and he never returned to the courtroom. My attorney, I think it was a couple days later, she gets called in by his clerk, and basically is informed that the trial's over with. And the interesting thing is he actually ruled against me on every single issue, not 99%, but 100%. I mean, he nailed me on everything. He ordered both properties sold, that I were to pay my exes all of her attorney fees. So I was left with no other choice than to file an appeal.
Filing an appeal is what someone does if they're trying to reverse a judge's decision. Unfortunately, the appeals court can only change a decision or order a retrial if the family court judge didn't apply the family code correctly. Aside from that, appeals courts don't have the power to change a judge's ruling, even if the judge's decisions were biased, one-sided, or cruel.
2 days after I had filed my appeal, McBrien found out about it and has admitted that he picked up the phone and called his buddy, who just happened to be chief of legal at the Department of General Services, where I'd worked for 18 years. And I had an impeccable work history, and I was just escorted out of the building and fired.
It became clear to Ulf that the judge was retaliating against him for filing an appeal. So Ulf submitted a complaint to the Judicial Council. This is where people can report unethical or incompetent judges. But the Judicial Council is made up of judges and lawyers, and they rarely remove a judge from office. In fact, that year there were over 1,000 complaints filed against judges in the state of California alone. Of those 1,000 complaints, none of the judges were fined, none of the judges were put in jail, and none of the judges were removed from office. Even though the Judicial Council found that Ulf's judge engaged in willful misconduct and contacted Ulf's employer, they didn't fire him. And even though the appeals court and the Judicial Council acknowledged that the judge was in the wrong, Ulf's divorce still caused him to go completely broke.
His mistake has cost me hundreds of thousands of dollars. Now, I've not been reimbursed any of that money. But not fun at the age of 51 to start over. And all my other friends are talking about, getting ready for retirement at, 55 or so. And here I have to begin again. So.
Unfortunately, Ulf had no choice but to move back in with his parents who live in Scandinavia. It's another part of the world where divorce is done much differently.